Upper Echelon is brought to you by Deloitte for innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning. Turn to Deloitte. Russell Loubser is the Chief Executive of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, a position he's held for 14 years, and he's in our Upper Echelon this week. Russell, many of the guys who list on your clients would say that 5 years, maybe 7 years is as long as a CEO should be. We had Yanni Mouton here last week who was saying he's going to work until he's 81. You're doing 14 years. Why are you deciding to finally leave the JSE at the end of the year?
Well, when I leave at the end of December, it would have been 15 years. It's not as if I've lost my appetite for the financial markets, for business life, and definitely not for the JSE. So then why am I leaving? I guess if you've been the CEO for 15 years, then I think it's fair to say that I probably won't be the CEO for the next 15 years. And that's what we as the JSE wanted to put in place now, because remember when we announced my standing down in March, we immediately announced who my successor would be. That's going to be Nikki Newton-King. And there's nobody better, in my view, to take over from me. And hopefully Nikki will be the CEO for the next 15 years. Because, Alec, that's what I believe it takes. I couldn't be more against that theory that we seem to think works in South Africa, where you parachute people in for 2 or 3 years and you expect them to perform miracles. My experience has been that doesn't work, is likely hardly ever to work. It's grind to a large degree. And it's persistence and it's perseverance and it's all those things which are unsexy, but which in my view are completely necessary if you want quality.
Succession planning is something that doesn't really get the focus it should in South Africa. We've seen a number of big companies recently parachuting, exactly as you say, parachuting new people in. Wonder why that is.
Yeah, well, it could be a combination of things, I guess, Alex. Maybe sometimes you're lucky and you just find somebody that's absolutely outstanding that is now available. It could be that. Maybe it's a lack of planning. Maybe it's the circumstances that just force you into that situation. Before we got to that situation, myself, my chairman and the JSE, we wanted to make sure that this transition is completely seamless. Everybody knows Nikki. The quality there is obvious. She's been at the JSE for 6 months longer than me. She's been my deputy for 8 years. Now, if that's not proper thinking regarding succession planning, then I would want to know what is.
But it's consistent with the Russell Loubser most people know. Disciplined, focused, planned. You don't seem to do things on the fly. Everything that we've seen from when you took over at the JSE, and there was a huge job to be done, has been done in a logical approach, a logical manner, despite quite a lot of criticism at various times.
Yes, and well, you know, Alec, there's not a lot of. I was going to say there's not a lot of genius involved. There's no genius involved. This is plain common sense. And I was talking to one of your colleagues before you got here. There's no reason why every single state-owned enterprise can't operate at the same efficiency level as the JSE. There's no reason why every municipality, every government department can't operate at the same efficiency level as the JSE. They can. All it requires is plain common sense, good leadership, good people surrounding the leader, and then one matric kid said when she was asked, how come you got 10 distinctions in grade 12? She said it's easy as ABC. Apply bum to chair. That's what it is. It's get down, do the work. And then, of course, instill the right values so that you don't have the corruption we have in so many departments. Do your research properly. Do the graft. There's no genius involved.
This is hard work.
It's just plain hard work.
You've mentioned a little bit about municipalities, provinces and so on, government sector. You're doing a bit of national service. 2009 appointed to the SAA board. You still there?
Yes, I am still there.
How's that going?
It's going very well because you've got good leadership. You've got Cheryl Carolus, you've got Cesar Mzimele, the chairman and CEO respectively, who are no-nonsense people who work very hard, who are dead straight. Then at least you've got a chance, Alec. No guarantee, but turn that coin around. If you don't have at least those two ingredients, honesty, integrity at the top, well then I'm telling you, you have got no chance whatsoever in that organization. Then it's just a question of when and how big the problem is going to be.
So as citizens, what we should be demanding of the leaders of public sector enterprises, state-owned enterprises, is that there's integrity first, and thereafter that then there's application. It was interesting, I was looking through the SAA website, and there's an old story that is still there somewhere, boasting about how the board of SAA, this goes back prior to your time, were represented on 150 different boards. The CEO at the time, Kaya Ngula, was on 26 different boards, and that was made as a boast because they were in great demand by other South African organizations. Clearly, you can't really apply your expertise to that wider spread.
Absolutely. And hopefully we are learning as a country that that type of absolute nonsense, because you're quite correct. I defy the person who says you can have a full-time job, which SAA is, and still be on 26 other boards. That is madness, and it's not a surprise that we had the problems there eventually that we did have.
Russell, what about your background? And I mentioned that earlier, discipline, focus. You played provincial hockey. You played near-provincial squash. You've done 20 Arguses, so you keep in shape. You look very young. How old are you now?
61.
61. You're a young 61-year-old. Where do you go, or how do you get that? How do you get that in your life? How do you get the discipline instilled that you've managed to sustain throughout?
Yeah, if you want to fit all those things in, then you'll find a way of doing them. Because it's easy to say, oh, I'm just too busy. I've just got too many things on my plate. I want to do all those things, so I find time to fit them in. Like you must probably do with your love of horses. You'll find a time to fit that activity in. That means I have to get up earlier than most, and I do that gladly in order nowadays to cycle with a group of mates, and I love it. So twice a week it's up at 4 o'clock in the morning to cycle, and then on weekends it's up at 6:30. Well, up at 5 so that we can cycle at 6:30.
But have you always had that? Because you went to university, you are a chartered accountant, you've had to learn very difficult areas. For instance, when you started in the futures market, or started the futures market in South Africa, that takes a lot of application. Were you brought up that way?
Yeah, and we are 4 brothers, and we are completely different. My 3 elder brothers are completely different to me. So I hope it was the same father. I know it was the same mother. Who knows these things? Only the mother will know, that's for sure. Yes, I've always been like that. I've always loved physical exercise, and I've always had to work very hard at the things that I was physically more or less good at. And I also had to work very hard at the things that I was mentally good at.
So it hasn't come easy to you?
No, it hasn't. Well, no, it hasn't come easy to me. Certain things I found easy, like maths. That came easy to me. And then eventually accounting, that came easy to me. But being able to do maths and accounting doesn't mean to say that you're worth anything to anybody. You then have to start applying that in a practical manner in order to answer that question. This mental ability that you do have, is that of any use to anybody?
Russell, you've charted the JSE's course, particularly in the most recent financial crisis, extremely well. Were you helped, though, by the fact that our banks were also pretty sound?
No question about that. That old saying, where you stand on a situation or a position depends on where you sit. That sometimes is very, very true. We didn't have that issue of banks collapsing about your ears in South Africa. So that certainly made life easier for us. But in addition to that, we had thought through these things for the last 15 years very, very carefully. For instance, one of the big things that many exchanges panicked on around the world, and all regretted it later. They all justified it vehemently when they instituted it, but regretted it hugely later, was this stupid action that they took of banning the short selling of financial shares. And when we saw that happening in 2008, I discussed that with my regulator very deeply and carefully, explained to my regulator what we have in place, like you can't do a naked short sell in South Africa. You have to have the scrip borrowing arrangement agreement in place before your broker allows you to do it. Now that is completely different to a naked short sell. So it meant that we didn't have to panic and introduce these stupid things. But in addition to that, as you say, very thankful for the fact that our banks weren't doing anything stupid. And their credit must go to the Reserve Bank, the Banking Supervision Department of the Reserve Bank, of course, as well as to the CEOs of the banks, because they are the ones who make those calls.
We've come out of it pretty well as a country, but I guess if you look back now in the last 15 years in December, and I'm sure there's a book in there somewhere, you're going to think of the things that you didn't achieve, and perhaps the one thing you would have liked to have achieved more of is in Africa, and seen Africa open up its companies, or have perhaps more of them listed on the JSE. What went wrong there?
Yeah, you're right. I would have preferred that to have been more successful. But you can't change people, and people every single time are responsible for either making things happen or screwing things up, like CEOs. CEOs either make things happen or lead or take the wrong path for the company. Now our focus for at least the first 10 years I was at the JSE was to work with African exchanges. That means you work with the people in the African exchanges, and if those people don't want to change, well, then nothing changes. And that can be for a variety of reasons. Because they feel threatened, because they're told from above, you don't do this. That happens. And I can give you examples. I might just not mention the names. But people either buy your story, which we were punting, which was essentially greater cooperation, much greater cooperation between the exchanges, or they don't. When you keep on hitting your head against that brick wall, then you have to make a call, which we did about 5 years ago. And we said to ourselves, here in South Africa, our credo is the only two parties that count in my game, which is the issuer and the investor. The issuer being the listed company, the investor being of whatever nature, short-term, long-term, speculative, non-speculative, local, foreign. Those are the only two parties that count in South Africa. Therefore, why doesn't that count for the rest of Africa? And that's when we changed our focus. So now we approach issuers directly in Africa. Once again, the issuer is headed by a CEO. The CEO eventually has to make that call. Does he list on the JSE or not? And if the shopping in London is more attractive, then most probably the LSE will get that listing. What we can say for sure, though, Alec, is that the product offering that we can put on the table is completely comparable with the best exchanges in the world. That wasn't the case 15 years ago. It is now and has been for the last number of years.
You've invested heavily in technology to make that possible.
Yes.
We
had to.
Has that paid off, do you think, so far? You've also had your glitches along the line.
Absolutely. We've had a great trading system for the last 8 years. That's the London Stock Exchange, is identical to the LSE's trading system. We're going on to the LSE's new system next year sometime, which is even bigger, better, faster, all those good things. That doesn't give you an edge. It just gives you a ticket to play. Without that ticket to play, well, you're not in the game. So, and it's just one aspect of it. There are lots of additional aspects to it, and there we are fairly unique in South Africa, where we do some things that no other exchanges do, for better or for worse. In our case, it seems to work, because we've kept that number one ranking now for the second year, as you know.
And World Economic Forum
Yeah.
ranking. That's quite incredible. Russell, it's hard to do justice to a 15-year career in 15 minutes, but just to close off with your legacy, if you look back now, and clearly you're going to be around, you're not going to go off into the sunset and catch trout.
No.
What would you like to do? How would you like to be seen for the time that you're at the JSE?
Yeah, and that is, that's a question I posed to some of the people that I've been negotiating with over the last number of years. And some of those deals came off and some of them didn't come off. And to all of them I posed that question: what type of legacy would you like to do? Now, you've asked me that question. Well, I would simply like to be remembered as one person in a group, because my team was absolutely essential. So one person in a group that managed to take an old-style stock exchange, turn it into a very modern and now respected stock exchange, which plays its little part in the financial markets, which plays its part in the bigger economy of South Africa. That's how I'd like to be remembered.
Russell Loubser, the outgoing Chief Executive of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Upper Echelon was brought to you by Deloitte. For innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning, turn to Deloitte.